and you say thank you. In that looking, there was stillness. Just thank you. There was no judging. There was just a field of presence. That means you truly met another human being. You connected at a deeper level. And that is only possible when you are not lost or react to the world of form. The form of that person, which is either the person's body, or the person's external appearance, or the person's psychological form. And then you say, whatever, I don't like the way you spoke to me, or whatever, or I like, I don't. A space of no thought, a space of consciousness in the interaction, just looking or listening to what he or she says. But of course the awareness goes beyond the looking and the listening. There's actually a flow of energy between you. There's a totally different energy interaction that would be there when in a normal interaction would be mind energy, just two minds. And here you have very different frequency between two humans. It's peaceful, a peaceful, alive energy field that connects them, in which they momentarily become one. And even if the other human has no idea that what's going on, he or she may simply feel that you are, such a, later and say, that's a nice person. Because the human mind would then personalize it. In your presence, that human being felt suddenly free, not judged. Him or herself, a bit more than usual, felt you didn't impose what normally humans impose on other humans. Similar to a dog or a cat, but better. And so they may even invite you for a cup of tea. Come home with me. I'd like to be around you. Well, they may not say that because the mind is fearful of true relationship. And depending what country you're in, when you meet a stranger, you will encounter varying degrees of protectiveness, self-protectiveness of the ego. In some countries it's more open, and these are often has very simple causes, like how cold or warm it is. Because if in a cold country, if you generation and generation in a cold country become tight and there's tension in the body. They have to protect themselves, not only psychologically, but also physically. The two get mixed up. And so in some countries, you talk to a stranger at a bus stop, they take 2 steps backwards. He's talking to a stranger. And there's a suspicion immediately, he wants something. Because that's the ego thinks in those terms, he wants something from me. Smiling, in some countries it's frowned upon. You're smiling at somebody. In some places where there's still a little bit less mind identification, they smile more. I had a friend from the Philippines, and she came to England for the first time when I was living there. In the first few days and weeks she had great difficulties, because when she was walking around the street she smiled at everybody. And she was quite good looking, so the car screeching to a halt, she said, "Come in." She didn't want to come in, she was just happy. So I had to tell her, you can't smile here. And that's meeting strangers, being theirs. And then, even more challenging, meeting humans with whom you share a lot of past. The more past you share with them, the more the old behavior patterns will want to come back in. You know that with meeting your parents, your wife, your husband, after many years of marriage. Patterns get very established of who you think he is, who he thinks you are, and the way in which you interact. Or more difficult, meeting your ex-husband or your ex-wife. And be present then and there. And be in the body. So you're meeting human beings without past. Not that you cannot remember certain things they did, but not to bring the past as an active operating principle into the interaction. Meeting everyone without past, just in this moment, through the power of this moment, which is the power of presence, which is who you are. And not meeting the other person as a walking personal history. And that is an enormously liberating thing to do when you can meet even your mother and father, with whom quite a few people, some people have a wonderful relationship with their mother and father, which is beautiful. Some grew up in a relatively conscious family. And many in this world did not grow up in a conscious, their father and mother were manifesting varying degrees of unconsciousness. And resentment built up over the years, so many between adult children and parents, often this grievances, resentments, complaints. He doesn't understand me, I get criticized all the time. He doesn't even want to understand me, my father, my mother. And the same reactions happen every time you visit them. And then you have a fight, and then you leave, and next time it happens again. And then one day you meet them, you arrive at the doorstep, and you look at them and feel the inner body at the same time. And then you come in and you sit down, and you look at them, still feeling the inner body, because now it's vital that you're anchored in that now. And then you get the old thing, your father says, are you still involved in that spiritual airy-fairy nonsense? Still haven't got a job, have you? I told you years ago you should be doing this and that. And then you have to be very present. And just sit there and simply say, well, yes, I'm still doing that. So. But then he, if it's your father, or she, if it's your mother, after a while will feel a slight disorientation because you are not feeding the old patterns anymore. You're not reacting, and his or her ego will feel there's something missing here. And so it will be hard for them to keep up that playing out that script if the other one isn't playing anymore, isn't reacting anymore, simply stating this is how it is. And you don't even expect anything anymore, because expectations that he or she should behave in a particular way to make me happy is to do with being identified with certain thoughts. That's how things should be. He should understand me so that I can be happy. The whole thing is an illusionary edifice. You won't be happy even when he understands you. It won't make any real difference to you. Now he understands me, so now what? What has changed? Nothing. He doesn't understand me, so it's the same, nothing. So you become free of that which you thought you needed when you were identified with thought. In presence, you don't really need anything, psychologically speaking. You don't need psychological this or that. And there you are, and then you can see the patterns in your mother or father crumbling. And for the first time, perhaps, he or she will ask you a genuine question. What are you really into? What is that? This has happened. People have told me these miracles happen. And if they don't, that's fine too. It doesn't really matter. With presence comes an acceptance, a compassionate acceptance of what is, which very often means what is the human being in front of you. Be compassionate, giving them space to be, because presence is, you have found your inner space, more spaciousness, formless consciousness, peace. Great practice is human beings with whom you have a lot of past, you share a lot of past, and maybe with their old grievances, old resistances, old judgments going on for years. And then forgiveness becomes unimportant. I want to forgive whoever it is, but I just can't forgive. Or you feel, I can't forgive him, I'm not going to forgive him, I will let go of the most precious part of my identity if I forgive him. This grievance has kept me going for years, provided 50% of my mind activity and 30% of my verbal output. Grievance, related to grief, related to grave, related to heaviness. Strange what words will tell you already. The heaviness of a grievance, the lifelessness. And when you're faced with a challenging situation, this happens sometimes in life, you face the situation fully as presence. And you're able then to look, and out of that current of awareness that flows, there's the situation. The current of awareness that flows into the situation is intelligence itself and activates whatever it is that the situation requires. It activates it from within you as a response, action perhaps, words, action. It also activates the total energy field that is the world, that is intelligent. And so things happen suddenly that are helpful factors, because the greater intelligence is operating. Just the right thing happens. Not that the external world can ever provide you with absolute, limitless comfort and joy. That's not its purpose. That is only in the formless consciousness, not in the world of form. So it's in the nature of the world of form that it will, according to the mind, go wrong frequently. But it's not wrong at all. The mind calls it wrong because I expected something else. And some situations need action. Others need simply to be totally accepted. But even situations that require action need to be accepted first as the isness of this moment. You can't argue with that. And then, out of that acceptance, the energy of presence, whatever answer is required comes. This is the same energy that in a very limited area great master sportsmen use when they do their sport, whatever they do. They are in a state of thoughtlessness. They call the zone. That's maybe a recent expression. They are in the zone. So the zone means in that state where they are at their best because they are not doing it. Power is moving through them, but only in their limited field of hitting that ball. It's usually not in the rest of their life. You may become extremely good at hitting a ball. Big ball, small ball. But I believe this is the reason why people become fascinated with watching certain games, like tennis or whatever, for hours in which, after all, not much is happening. It can go on for hours. Plop, plop. And yet to see how they, out of presence, play, can be a joy. There's nobody there playing. They are at one with the game, totally at one with the process. There's no separate entity. And it's a joy to see it. But one can live like that. It's the same. We've all seen martial arts movies. And if they're good, then you can see that the action arises suddenly out of alert stillness. There's absolute alertness in which there's nobody there as a person. There's only the looking and the alertness. Then action arises and immediately back into stillness. A wave of action and it's gone. The martial arts master never gets angry. That would be an egoic reaction. It would be a diminishment. It comes out of stillness, out of no mind. No mind. Our destiny is to live in that way. Not that we don't think anymore. Thought operates still. It operates when it is needed for certain tasks. It also operates in a harmless way as clouds of thought drifting in and out of your field of awareness as you go about your life, with nice spaces in between. And there comes a thought. The fundamental thing that has changed, there is no longer self in your thoughts. Self, a me, a sense of self. The self goes out of thought. Whereas before, thought was full of self. You were so identified, it became you. And if somebody argued with some thought that you held, you felt personally attacked. Somebody doubted your opinion, said, no, that's not quite right. What do you mean it's not right? You identified with a mental position. Thought had self in it. And if thought has self in it, it's a painful business. It's a painful trap. And thought becomes serious and problematic and creates a problematic life. And there comes the seriousness that every thought that you hold has a heaviness to it because you're totally in it and you totally believe in it. They all believe in their little stories and interpretations, even the collective ones. That's how we see it. They are attacking us. No, we are defending ourselves. They have all their own story. We are the victims. No, there was the victims. They have their own story. They tell you, and they're totally identified with their interpretation. There is no other. This is the truth. It's self. It has a collective self in it, or it has a personal self in it. And it has a heaviness because there's the delusion of self in thought. And when thought is free of self, because your self has turned out to be a soap bubble, that there was nothing much there, and the true self is presence, the power of presence, the aliveness of presence, the intelligence of presence. The stillness of it is who you are. But not whatever thought comes into your head or the emotion that goes with it. Those are temporary energy fields. So, as you become rooted in presence, thought loses its seriousness and its heaviness. And so the thought that remains is either empowered, which you might use to create this or that in the game of creation, not to fulfill myself, to be really fully myself, expecting through it to gain fame and recognition and wealth and blow myself up. I mean, they both go together. First you blow yourself up and then it pops. So thought can be very powerful for creation. It always, before something comes into material form, there's a thought form. But humans will not be allowed to fully utilize the power that is in thought for creating as long as they live in egoic illusion, because what they would create would be hell out of ego. If every ego could create, it would be hell. It's already half hell with a limited power of creation of thoughts. Thought loses its seriousness and it loses its capacity to make you unhappy because you're not totally in it anymore. So little thoughts, they're recognized as, there goes a thought, no more. It doesn't get hold of you, grasp you, and you don't get hold of it. And then thought is fine. It's not a problem, it's still there. But it's not the basis of your life anymore, of who you are. No self. As long as there's self in it, there's suffering. And I believe this is probably what the Buddha talked about 2,600 years ago. There's no self in anything. That is the doctrine of anatta, no self. Don't look for yourself in any form, thought form or other form. Anatta, no self. Because if you look for yourself in form, that is suffering. And so the question is, people ask, is there such a thing as reincarnation? Yes, every day. Every time you identify with any form, including a thought or an emotion, and you're totally in it, you have incarnated into a new form. It's become a me. And then comes the next, you incarnate into that, you identify with that, a reaction. You incarnate with the emotion that rises, and what you say, you're totally possessed by the thoughts. Another incarnation. So the question is, how many times each day do I reincarnate? And so, of course, reincarnation is a fact. And when does it end? The end of reincarnation can only come at this moment. When I don't identify with the form that arises. I let it be. The emotion, the thought, some external form, and say, this is mine, don't you touch that. It's bigger than yours. Even children have that already. My dad is stronger than yours. So they talk of the end of the need to reincarnate, the cycle, the continuous cycle of birth. But that cycle ends, of course, if you live under the compulsion to reincarnate every day, it's more than likely that the compulsion will continue. This little entity that believes itself to be separate, consciousness having entered the dream of form, and that's fine from a larger perspective, needs to have more incarnations because it wasn't satisfied with the thousands of incarnations it had in this lifetime. Okay, where's the next one? I need another body. And the drive, the wanting to perpetuate myself as a form is still there. Wanting to stand out as someone, be someone, exist for again. And which is the ego's. The ego's need to stand out. What about me? Me. And even if an ego is timid and doesn't want to, it's just a reversal of that. Hiding underneath that is the need to stand out. A timid ego that doesn't want to stand out, simply it is afraid that it will be criticized when it does stand out and it will suffer defeat. It's afraid of standing out, but it wants to stand out. Is that need to be someone special, ultimately, extraordinary, special, more than. It's always part of that. You can notice